The story begins right where we left off. In the second season, guard number 11 didn't kill player 246, he just wounded him and took him to the operating room to supposedly remove his organs. On the other hand, they took Giun back to the room in a coffin. Although he was in very bad shape, because the voices in his head had grown stronger, he blamed himself for the death of his best friend and the other players who followed him in his rebellion. That's why he begs the guards to kill him, so he won't have to keep suffering. But the leader was ruthless and chained him to a bed so he wouldn't try to kill himself. When it was time to choose whether they would keep playing, Giun's vote was annulled. The players on the circle side were now much more numerous and threatened those who voted for the X to change their vote. Number 100 starts bothering Giun and tells him it's very strange that he's the only one who came back alive. He thinks that he sacrificed the others to get more money, so he congratulates him. The shaman tells him that the souls behind him are far more numerous now and that the voices in his head will only get stronger. Giun, annoyed, attacks her and tells her not to talk about things she doesn't know. Meanwhile, Guard 11 arrived at the operating room. She made everyone believe she was on their side. When they let their guard down, she pulls out her weapon and eliminates everyone except the doctor. Since player 246's wound was deep and he needed someone to save him. In the dormitory, everyone starts eating. Everyone except Giun, who couldn't even move. He was like a lost soul, as if he were dead inside. Player 122 apologizes for not coming back with the ammunition, but player 7 says it's all Taejo's fault because he froze and hid in a corner and didn't bring the ammunition. Giun believes her and thinks that maybe they would have won if he had arrived on time. Meanwhile, Giun and his team hadn't found the island. Also, the captain was a very good liar. He always kept them away from the island. But Bonsok starts to suspect him because he saw him with a screwdriver when he heard that strange noise. But Juno tells him that he saved him and that he helped him look for the island all this time, so he can't suspect him. Meanwhile, Giun had started to feel hatred. He thought Taejo was to blame. When he left the dormitory, Giun's hatred grew even stronger.
Porque los cadáveres de sus compañeros estaban colgando. Luego era hora del cuarto juego, el cual se llamaba Escondidas. Los jugadores se dividen en dos grupos seleccionados al...
His part has turned good.
Taja, los azules tienen una llave las cuales pueden abrir las puertas.
If they found the secret door, they could get out and win. Of course, the captain has become a player, and for his part, the captain has become a good player.
Para poder ganar. Si no logran eliminar a nadie en el tiempo establecido, serán descalificados.
His part has become a good player, and for his part, the captain has become a player, and for...
6 ocupe su lugar, así nadie sospechará de ellos, o eso es...
The captain has become...
Volviendo con el juego, la señora y su hijo estaban en equipos distintos.
The lady was on the red team, and she would have to kill someone if she wanted to pass. But luckily, the guard tells them that they can switch teams before the game starts. The lady agrees and switches with her son because she was too kind and knew she could never kill anyone. So she asks her son not to worry about her, to focus on making it through the round and not to look for her. Meanwhile, Juno was about to go back to look for the island, but Bonsok tells him he won't go because he trusts his instincts a lot. And he knows that the captain is hiding something, that's why he'll stay on land to investigate it. Back on the island, the game was about to start. That's why player 222 switches with her ex-boyfriend, because she didn't feel capable of eliminating anyone. Also, her ex promises that once he eliminates someone, he will go protect her. Once ready, the blue team goes out first. They had a 2-minute advantage to run and look for the exit, but since the place was too big, they agreed to shout if someone found it. But 2 minutes weren't enough. Then, the red players go out to hunt. Juno, for his part, was thirsty for revenge. The only thing he was thinking about was taking down Taejo. Player 333 teams up with the addict to make it easier. For her part, player 120 helps the old woman and player 222. Since they were weak, she knew they wouldn't last long. The red players, for their part, gradually began to find blue players. And they eliminated them without mercy. Even those who seemed to be good became ruthless. Others, naive, believed in the shaman and thought she would help them survive. Others, like player 100, formed temporary alliances to use the others to their advantage. Apparently, there were 3 types of keys. circle, triangle, and square. That's why a group of 3 was ideal, like the group of player 120 and her friends. But unfortunately for them, player 222 was getting weaker and weaker, barely able to walk on her own. Giun, for his part, was acting crazy. He was desperately looking for anyone who looked like Taeho. He didn't care about being eliminated, he just wanted to take him down. At the same time, player 333 and his partner managed to find a member of the blue team. But he wouldn't let himself be eliminated without putting up a fight. Since he was unarmed and outnumbered, defending himself was difficult. He gets injured and both sides reach an agreement. That way, they each get half a point. Meanwhile, player 120's group is attacked. Since they are 3 women, they try to escape, but player 222 twists her ankle while going up the stairs, so escaping is no longer an option. Player 120 is forced to fight. Luckily, she was quite strong and manages to defeat her attacker. But player 222's foot was completely destroyed. If she was a burden before, now she was a real hindrance, but even so, her friends don't abandon her. For his part, player 333 and his partner eliminate their second victim, allowing them to advance, but Thanos' friend was very cunning and tells him to keep killing, because the more they eliminate, the more money they'll have. He agrees and starts an uncontrollable hunt. When she hears her name, player 222 thinks her ex will keep his promise. Giun ignored everything around him. He will find Taeyo. Meanwhile, he was trying to escape, and when he was almost killed, he managed to defend himself and got a weapon, although he was badly injured. Back with the girls, player 222 wanted them to leave her behind. Her foot couldn't take it anymore. The old lady told her she would stay with her, but at that moment, her water broke and she went into labor. The lady helps her as much as she can, but giving birth is very difficult. And giving birth in a place like that is even harder. At the same time, the shaman chose the wrong door and sacrificed her followers to save herself. Then the shaman ran into Taejo and later into Giun, who wanted to eliminate her because of the things she said. But she tells him that Taejo is outside and that he's leaving a trail of blood. Giun follows him, and the shaman once again saves herself. While escaping from the ones in red, the shaman manages to find the exit. Once again, the gods favor her, or at least that's what she said, because to open the door, you need your part. Player number 100 was desperate. Player 333 and his partner were close, so he pretended to be dead. And luckily for him, they believed it. Then he runs into the shaman. She tells him that she found the exit and that with their 3 keys, they can leave now. But as expected, when they open the door, the man betrays her. She gets locked inside, just one step away from winning. And, unluckily for her, the weak boy enters the room. He had found Thanos' necklace and had taken a pill, so he was hallucinating. And when the shaman shouts at him, the boy gets scared and ends up finishing her off. Back with the girls, player 222 had a daughter. She was healthy. Everyone gets excited because it's a sign of hope. But a player in red heard the cries and player 120 had to fight once again. This time, it was much harder. But in the end, she managed to defeat him. Although she didn't come out unscathed, thanks to that fight, she managed to find the exit. But instead of leaving and saving herself, she goes back for her teammates, tells them she found the exit and that they can be at ease now. But at that moment, player 333 stabs her in the back. Player 222 sees it in terror because he was supposed to have already won. But at least he was able to keep his promise, so he left her alone and went with his partner to continue the slaughter. The old woman was devastated. After crying for her friend, she says it's time to go because the exit must be close. But at that moment, her son arrives, who still hadn't killed anyone. He was already running out of time. He wanted to finish off player 222, who couldn't defend herself. His mother tells him not to do it and to kill her instead, but he tells her that he could never kill his own mother. That's why the lady had no choice but to stab him. This game had corrupted her son, and she couldn't let him become a bad person, so she preferred to stab him before he got his hands dirty. For his part, Giun finds Taeho. He tells him the whole truth, that he got scared and panicked because he actually never served in the army. The tattoo he had was fake. He was never in the Navy. Giun doesn't believe him and tells him it was all his fault. Taeho begs him for mercy, but then attacks him with a broken knife. He says it's not his fault. The only one to blame is him. If not for his crazy plan, they would have won the next vote and everyone would have gone home with money. They both start fighting, and in the end, Giun takes Taiho's life. Then Giun felt guilty and admits that Taiho was right. If it hadn't been for him, the others would have survived. That's why he also tries to take his own life, but once again, the guards save him. At the same time, player number 7 was still alive, but since he couldn't eliminate anyone, he knew he would soon be eliminated. That's why he apologizes to his mother and says goodbye to her. The lady cries inconsolably because she knows she condemned her son. For their part, the VIP members had arrived on the island. This time, they weren't the same old men from the previous games. Also, they had put on the uniforms and were eliminating the players themselves. Apparently, every year they invited different people. That's why those games are so exclusive, because you don't choose when to go. When they returned to the dormitory, Thanos' friend was desperate because he had lost his magic pills, and without them, he was lost. Then, the lady and player 222 arrived with her baby. In the 4th game, 35 players were eliminated and now only 25 remain. With the money that's been collected, many could already leave. But human greed knows no limits. Meanwhile, on land, Bonsok discovers that the captain of the ship is really suspicious. No one in the city knows him. Everything he has said seems to be a lie, but he didn't have anything solid, so Juno wasn't convinced. He had also found the island where his brother shot him, so he knows he's very close to finding the island where the games are held. Back on the island, the VIP members were very excited, but they believed that now the players would choose. One of them has about $1 million, which would be enough to pay off his debts and live comfortably, but the leader tells them not to worry because humans always want more. It's in their nature to be greedy. One by one, they start to vote. Some change their minds. Even Thanos' friend wanted to leave, but the majority votes to play again. That's why the old lady begs them to think about the baby who was just born. She even offers to give the baby her father. With that money, they would already have enough to last a lifetime. She begs them to vote to go back home, but no one listens to her, and the majority votes to keep playing. Meanwhile, the guards discover the mess made by guard number 11. But since she replaced the doctor with the player she saved, the executive thinks it's his fault. But guard number 11 had infiltrated the executive's office and tells him that it was all her idea. She threatens to kill the VIPs if they don't let her go, so the executive has no choice but to give her what she asks for. In the room, the kind lady, as always, tells player 222 to eat well, because her baby needs her now more than ever. She apologizes for what happened with her son, but the lady tells her it wasn't her fault. At night, she tucks in the baby and says goodbye to player 222, then tells Guillaume to stop blaming himself. Nothing that happened was his fault. Life is very unfair. Bad people blame others and move on, but good people blame themselves for the rest of their lives. She confesses to him that her son was just like him. No matter how hard he tried, things didn't go well for him, and he blamed himself for everything bad. Even in the end, he apologized to her for not making it. That's why she says she feels very guilty, because she carries her son within her, and she doesn't think she can go on anymore. So she asks Guillaume to take care of player 222 and her baby. She knows he is a good person and that she can trust him with this difficult task. Meanwhile, Bonsok finds the captain's house and decides to find out once and for all if he works for the bad guys, but there was a huge dog at the door. Still, he gets into the house, and as they say, seek and you shall find. He manages to find a photo where the captain is seen with the man who was slapping people, but then the dog breaks loose and attacks him. So he has no choice but to shoot it. When he was about to leave, he finds a well with the pink uniform and a lot of money, but unfortunately for him, the police arrive as well. The next day, the lady had committed suicide. She couldn't bear the burden of having killed her own son. For their part, the guards discovered that player 246 was still alive and had replaced guard number 16, so they could no longer let them go. No player could escape from the island. Later, the 5th game begins. Player 222 was in really bad shape. She could barely walk. That's why Giun offers to help her with her baby, so she doesn't accidentally hurt her. She is suspicious at first, but in the end, she has no choice but to accept. Because if she dies, her baby will too. She admits she considered abandoning her, but lacked the courage. Giun says he also has a daughter, and though he wasn't a good father, watching her grow up was the best thing in his life. That's why he promises to help her, but the next game was jumping rope along a very narrow path. One of the VIPs bet on player 222, but now it was impossible for her to make it through. That's why another VIP tells him that to make it exciting, he forces her to cross with the baby. This was just to see how far a mother would go for her child, just for entertainment. The rules were simple. They just had to cross to the other side. Those who stay behind will be eliminated. Giun wants to cross with player 222 and leave the baby, planning to come back for her later. But the guards tell him that she is also considered a player, so she must cross as well or she will be eliminated. Giun, furious, doesn't know what to do, so he asks player 222 to wait. He will cross first with the baby and then come back for her. But no one dared to start. That's why the weak boy uses Thanos' cross to make the addict unable to do anything. And he thinks his magic pills were in there. But when he gets to the cross, it was empty, so disappointed he loses his life. Giun, for his part, knows he doesn't have much time, so he takes the baby and starts the game. But jumping rope with the baby was very difficult, and there was also a hole in the bridge. But against all odds, he manages to cross to the other side. That gives hope to the others who start to cross. So Giun can no longer go back for player 222. Also, when the second one arrives, he starts pushing the other players. He wants to eliminate them all at once to keep all the money for himself. This slows down the game a lot. And Giun knows that if it continues like this, no one will dare to cross. That's why Giun threatens to push the player if he doesn't let the others pass. That's how he starts moving the line along. For his part, player 333 apologizes to his ex for having killed her friend, but he asks her to let him help her. She doesn't want to because she knows her foot was too injured and the path was too narrow. Back with Giun, player 96 attacks him from behind. To defend himself, he has no choice but to throw him into the void. Then he asks everyone to hurry up because there were only 3 minutes left. But player 125 was completely shaken and took too long to cross. In the end, there's only 1 minute left, and when Giun wants to go back for player 222, she tells him not to do it and to please take care of her daughter instead. Then she throws herself into the void. The VIPs enjoyed the show, but they wanted to get rid of the baby. Although the one who bet on player 222 didn't agree. He tells them that since the baby is her daughter, she should have her number. So now the baby is player 222. When they return to the room, out of the 25 players left, 16 were eliminated. So now there are only 9 left. The other players think it's a mistake because there are only 8. But the guards tell them that the baby crossed the finish line. And now she has her mother's number, so each of them will get less money. That's why they want to get rid of the baby to have more money. Player 333 was a coward who didn't even flinch. Luckily, the guards warned them that violence is no longer allowed in the dormitory. Meanwhile, Bonsock was arrested, and he handed over all the evidence to the police. But as expected, they don't believe him. They think he's crazy, and that he's just an ordinary thief. Also, since he already had a criminal record, they tell him he'll go to prison for a long time. Then the police call the captain to tell him that someone broke into his house to steal. Bonsock takes advantage of that and quickly calls Juno to tell him that he was right, that the captain works for the bad guys. Juno realizes it, but it was already too late. The captain took out everyone on the ship. Only Juno and the team leader were left alive. Although in the end, Juno manages to take him out with a harpoon. Then he asks the captain why he saved his life. He answers that it was by order of his brother. He ordered him to keep him alive and away from the island. Back to the games, the participants received a big feast. They even prepared milk for the baby. Then they have to vote whether to continue or withdraw. But to keep them playing, they reveal something to them. That in the final game, they only have to eliminate 3 players. And the 6 who remain will be the winners. This makes everyone excited because they only had to form a group of 6 and eliminate the rest. That's why most of them want to keep playing. Even player 333, who is supposed to be the baby's father. Meanwhile, outside, Juno wants to take a risk and keep searching for the island. He knows he's running out of time and that he must arrive before the game's end. Meanwhile, guard number 11 and player 246 were escaping, but the executive tells him they won't get very far because he sent a team to hunt them down. He also says it doesn't matter where they hide. He knows that player 246's daughter is in the hospital, and they'll go after her if they don't surrender. That's why she decides to let him escape alone, while she returns to the island. But the boat had a tracker. At night, 6 players form a team and promise to stick together and eliminate the 3 weakest. That's why the leader calls Giun to tell him that he has to make a decision. He gives him a knife and tells him he must take out the players while they sleep, or else they'll take him out. Giun takes the knife and wants to kill the leader, but the leader tells him to do it. That won't change anything because someone else will take his place the next day, and the games will go on as usual. That's why he promises him that if he kills the other players, he and the baby will be declared the winners. This was the same deal that Ilnam offered the leader when he was still a player. But unlike Giun, the leader accepted and killed all his companions. That's how they recruited him. But Giun wasn't like him. When he was about to finish off player number 100, he remembers Sebyuk, who asks him not to do it because he's not like them. Early in the morning, guard number 11 arrives at the executive's office and threatens him into deleting the files of player 246. But before he kills him, he says there's one more, the printed file which is in the leader's office. But when they were in the elevator, the executive manages to take the gun from him and they start fighting hand to hand. The executive was very strong and leaves her badly injured. He tells her she should have done what he said. But before killing her, his subordinate calls him to tell him he needs to return to the control room because the game was about to start. But guard number 11 takes the opportunity and calls the elevator. That way, she gets the gun. And when the executive tries to kill her, it was already too late. Meanwhile, the final game begins. Once again, it would be the Squid game. But this time, high above the ground. In each shape, they have to eliminate a player and move on to the next shape. If they don't eliminate anyone, everyone loses. The 6 thugs want to eliminate the baby first, but Giun tells them he won't give her to them. They tell him not to be stupid, that the baby lost her mother, and that she doesn't have a chance to survive. But Giun tells them that if they want to eliminate her, they'll have to eliminate both of them. The thugs have no problem with that, but player 333 says they can't do it, because that way they'll have to eliminate one more person, and there won't be 6 left, as they had planned. So he suggests eliminating player 125 first. Since he had been hallucinating due to withdrawal syndrome from not taking the pills Thanos left him, he gets upset and tries to defend himself. But player 333 grabs the steel bar and eliminates him. In the next phase, the thugs change tactics. They tell Giun that if he hands over the baby, in the next phase, they'll decide who gets eliminated by chance. But once again, he refuses. So once again, they threaten to throw them off. He tells them that if they do, they'll have to fight each other. So everyone starts to get scared. Meanwhile, the guard, she finds the files of all the players and sets them on fire. For his part, player 246 was being chased by the guards. And, unfortunately for him, they managed to hit the engine. But just when they're about to finish him off, Juno arrives and manages to save his life. But to keep them from shooting him, player 246 confesses that he's not a guard, but a player. Juno scans him and confirms it's true. That's why he asks him to tell him where the island is. That way, finally, Juno finally finds the damn island. Then he heals player 246 and tells him to wait with his companion because the Coast Guard will arrive soon and they need to guide them to the island. Back to the game, player 333. He came up with a plan to take the baby from Giun. They plan to throw him into the void and catch him before he falls, so only the baby would fall. And they would eliminate him in the next round, but Giun still had the knife that the leader gave him to defend himself. But player 333 was ready to push him, although it seems he wasn't such a bad father because he betrays his partner and eliminates him. His supposed teammates were confused and asked him why he did it. He confessed that he is the baby's father and that he pretended all this time in order to save her. Hun suspects him but remembers seeing him talk to player 222, so he thinks it might be true. Then the others tell them to lower their weapons because they've already eliminated someone. And in the following rounds, they just have to pick someone at random. But player 333 says he doesn't believe them because most likely they'll end up betraying them, since there are 4 of them and only 2 of them. That's why the thugs take one of their own and beat him savagely. They tell them that he will be the next one eliminated, so they have no reason to doubt anymore. But Giun and player 333 still didn't trust them. Besides, Giun wasn't happy with that. He doesn't think that's the way things should be done. He suggests leaving it up to chance, but without including the baby. They get upset and tell him not to play around. That's why they start fighting again. But Giun manages to defend himself and ends up taking his opponent's life. As for player 333, he does the same. So now only the one who was beaten and the evil old man are left. Player number 100 tells them they did very well and that now everyone can win. But player 333 does what we've been waiting for since the beginning of the season. He doesn't listen to him and throws him into the void. Here's a little fact. His death happened just as the shaman predicted. At least she got one of her predictions right. That's how they managed to move on to the next round. But the one who was going to be sacrificed says he's tired of being the offering and doesn't want to keep playing anymore, so he decides to kill himself. Now only the three of them are left. The first to go is player 333.
Todos pensamos que era un buen padre, pero en realidad estaba completamente corrompido. Su avaricia no
Who can't be saved.
sacrificarse por su hija, así que le dice que se le entregue o todos.
And him, so that he can eliminate him instead of the baby. But player 333 doesn't trust him. He thinks he had something to do with player 222, and that's why he's so determined to save the baby. In the end,
De otra más que entregársela.
But when the bridge starts to disappear, he jumps in with a knife to confront him. He wants to keep his promise at any cost. But player 333 was insane. He was willing to sacrifice his own daughter just to save himself. Giun begs him not to do it. That's why he gives him his knife. But when he starts attacking him, he manages to defend himself. And while they're fighting, they both fall. Although Giun manages to hold onto a steel bar and player 333 grabs onto Giun's jacket, but the seams of the suit were cheap, and player 333 is eliminated. In the end, only Giun and the baby are left. The elimination of player 333 doesn't count because they didn't press the button. So Giun has to make a decision, save himself or save the baby. Because if they do nothing, both will die.
Giun no lo duda, arropa a la bebé.
And he says goodbye to her. Then he looks at the VIPs and tells them, "We're not horses, we're human beings." Then he throws himself into the void. Guard number 11, who was about to commit suicide, heard the baby's cry. And she saw Giun give his life for someone he barely knows, someone who isn't even able to recognize him. This fills her with hope. That means Giun didn't just save the baby, but also guard number 11. The VIPs are left stunned, but they're forced to escape because the Coast Guard was nearby, and they had to destroy all the evidence before they arrived. That's why, since the games were already over, they started the self-destruct sequence. Juno had arrived too late. Although he managed to see his brother before leaving, he asked him why he did all this. He just looked at him, but didn't answer. As for the VIPs and the guards, including number 11, they are evacuated. Months later, someone steals all the money that Giun had saved. We also see that player 246. He had gone back to work at the park. Even though he didn't win the money, many people joined in and helped him raise the money to save his daughter. Guard number 11 goes to visit him, and he's very happy to know that both of them are okay. Later, the people who were looking for people from the north tell him that they found a girl who matches the description of his daughter. She gets excited because she might be able to see her daughter again. Bonsock, for his part, gets out of prison. He was accused of theft and resisting arrest. Juno went to meet him, and to give him the bad news that in the end, they weren't able to catch the bad guys and that someone stole Giun's money. Bonsock hopes it was him because they didn't know he was dead. When Juno returns home, the baby was waiting for him. Now she was bigger and wearing her mother's clothes. There was also a golden card, that is, the card with the prize. Brother. Because that's probably what Giun would have done. We also see that Sebyok's brother and his mother finally reunite. After so many years, they finally saw each other again. For his part, Bonsock kept Giun's hotel and planned to remodel it to make an honest living. Then we found out that the one who had stolen the money was the leader. He took everything to give it to Giun's daughter. He tells her that her father left her that box. At first, she says she doesn't want to receive anything. The leader gives her the terrible news that her father died and that giving her that box was his last wish. In the end, the leader showed some compassion, but he was still the leader after all. In the final scene, we see that a woman was playing Dakchi with a homeless man. That means she was recruiting new players, but this time in another country. Or maybe, as the rumors said, that there is a Squid Game in different parts of the world, not just in South Korea. And that's how this story ends. I hope you enjoyed this summary. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the ending of the series. I personally liked it, although I would have liked it more if Giun survived. Let me know in the comments if you like the idea that there is a Squid Game in Mexico, the United States, and in different parts of the world. I think it's great to see more games and different faces. I just hope they don't run it into the ground too quickly. Thank you for staying with me until the end. If you liked the video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any summaries. See you next time.